Guys, I'm giving recording access to all of you. So Chavi I've given to you, Isha I've given to you, and Ramani I'm given to you as well. Okay. So guys, let's start for the day. Sorry for not able to take lectures for the last 3 days, but not an issue. We'll just continue it from today, and then we'll just try to bucket up in the weekends, whatever lectures we have missed in between. So let's start. Just a moment. This other guy, Niranjan, he has joined a wrong meeting ID. Let me just inform him. In the meanwhile, just a moment. Okay, we'll start. He is joining in some time. Okay, so guys, in the last lecture, if you remember, we discussed about the architecture and we discussed some of the foundation components: GW core, IWFND, IWBP, and SAP underscore GWFND. These all foundation components, and apart from these foundation components, also onto the back end and onto your front end, some more UI5 related components, or your OData related SRAs, or your whatever, your GWAP, whatever onto your backend should be present inside your architecture components. So we discussed about the architecture. So just before we move ahead, we'll just summarize what we have discussed up till now and what we are going to do up till now with the help of a diagram, and then we'll move on with the actual implementation of the standard Fiori application, because now the architecture planning is almost done. These are all the components that you need to have, and these are all the from where you're going to search the different components and from where you're going to download the different components. We discussed all about that. So today we'll just summarize that with the help of a flow chart, and then we'll also summarize what needs to be done next in order to implement a particular Fiori application and bring it or make it visible to the end user onto the SAP Fiori Launchpad. So let me just draw a diagram in front of you. So I'll just add a new slide. So let's understand this. Let's start this diagram with a peculiar requirement from the customer. Let's say a customer has come up to you and he wants to implement, let's say, any one Fiori application. Let's say track purchase order. This is one Fiori application that he wants to implement onto in their organization. So these are the steps which I am going to list down in this flow chart that you will follow in order to end implement that particular Fiori application for that particular customer. So first of all, what you will do is, whenever a requirement comes from the customer, first of all, what you will do is definitely you want to first check what are the prerequisites for that particular application, what are the demands of that particular application from the architecture, and what are the different system upgrades or enhancement packs that are required on the corresponding system in order to go ahead and implement that particular Fiori application. So definitely, as we discussed in the previous lecture as well, you will refer either help.sap.com/Fiori, or you will refer the other URL that I just showed you, the Fiori apps reference library, in order to get all the information from the architecture point of view, or what are the prerequisites and what are the different Fiori components. Because if you remember, for every Fiori application, there are two product specific add-ons. One is the product specific UI add-on, which is the UI component which would be installed onto the gateway, and one is the product specific OData integration add-on which would be installed onto the backend starting from SRA. So all that information for that particular Fiori application you will capture, you will gather from either the help.sap.com or the Fiori apps reference library. So once you gather, as a Fiori consultant, once you gather all this information for that particular Fiori application, then you will, okay, so first of all this step would be done by the Fiori consultant. So once this step is done, then you will forward whatever information that you have gathered to the basis consultant. Now the basis consultant can go for an upgrade. So it might happen that the prerequisites for that particular Fiori application, like the track purchase order, has a prerequisite that the backend should have an enhancement pack level of 7, or the NetWeaver gateway should have the version of 7.40 and above. So you have the infrastructure in place, but that infrastructure is a bit older, so that particular Fiori application will not support. So if the information that the Fiori consultant is gathered for that particular Fiori application, if that information says that there is this particular enhancement pack required, or that particular SP level required, or that particular version required, and if it's not there in the architecture, then definitely whatever information you forwarded to basis consultant, the basis consultant will have to then take a call whether an upgrade is required into the existing infrastructure for that particular Fiori application or not. So definitely this particular step is optional. So the upgrade to a particular enhancement pack, or to a particular SP level, or to a particular version is optional. So it depends upon the existing infrastructure. So once the upgrade is done, then one more task that the basis consultant will have to do, and that is for sure. So this is not an optional step. The next step that the basis consultant will have to do, and that is of Fiori components. So this is a compulsory step. So if you remember what Fiori components, as we have seen in the previous lecture as well, for every Fiori application there are some Fiori component that you need to install. That is the UI add-on onto the front-end server, and the OData add-on onto the back-end server. So for every Fiori application, there would be a product-specific UI add-on, and there would be a product-specific OData add-on that the basis consultant definitely will have to install, depending upon the information that is forwarded by the Fiori consultant. So this is where the basis consultant will come into picture, whether an upgrade is required, or then there's some installation of Fiori components are required. Once that is done by the basis consultant, then again the complete control will come back to the Fiori consultant. So first, it will start from the Fiori consultant. They will gather the information, forward it to basis consultant. They will do an upgrade, do some installation of the Fiori components, and then again they will return it back to the Fiori consultant. Now, what the Fiori consultant will do is the configurations, because just by installing the Fiori components for that particular Fiori application, things are not going to work. So we'll have to do some some configurations. Okay, so we'll have to do some configurations. So let me just definitely this would be done by the Fiori consultant. Okay, so the configurations the Fiori consultant will have to do. Now, when I say configurations, there are different types of configurations that the Fiori consultant will have to do. So let me just draw another diagram wherein I will drill down this configuration into different types, and we'll discuss what are the different types of configurations that the Fiori consultant will have to do once this part is completed by the basis consultant. So once the basis consultant does the installations and give it to you, then the corresponding configuration needs to be done for that particular Fiori application in order to make it visible or make it usable for the end user. So let me just draw another slide where we would just drill down some more details about the configurations. So there are two types of configurations broadly. Okay, so let me just list down that first. Then we will discuss that the Fiori, all this thing, whatever I'm drawing onto this page would be done by the Fiori consultant, all the Fiori configurations for a particular Fiori application. So one type of configuration is called as the central configurations, and the other is application level configuration. So this type of configuration is one time, and this time is so basically the configurations are drilled down into two subtypes. That is, one is the central configurations that you will have to do, and another is the application level configurations. Now the central configurations are the configuration that you will have to do just once at a central level to build your Fiori infrastructure. So if, let's say, it's a new infrastructure, first time you are implementing a Fiori application for the first time on this new Fiori infrastructure. So for the first time, you will have to do the central level configurations. That is the only time that you will do the central level configurations. Once the central level configurations are done, then every time for each and every Fiori application that you're going or that you're planning to implement, for that you do not have to go for the central level configurations. For every Fiori application, you will do the application level configuration. But once at the infrastructure level, initially, you will have to do the central level configurations. So two types of configuration. One is a one-time configuration, that is the central level configuration. Another is the application level configuration. That is for each and every application, you will have to do some configurations. So now what exactly is covered inside the central configurations? Now, as we know, whatever Fiori applications that we are going to implement, all these Fiori applications are going to be assembled or finally visible to the end user inside the Launchpad. Correct. So before we do the application level configurations or try to make that particular application visible onto the Launchpad, we first have to construct the Launchpad. Okay, because by default, just by installing the components, the the Launchpad would not be activated. So inside the central level configurations, you will have to construct your Launchpad, which is a one-time activity. So once your Launchpad is constructed, so you can say your Launchpad is like a building. So once a building is constructed, then inside a building you can create that many flags, and you can allocate that flags to different users. But one time you will have to construct a building. Once the building is constructed, then you can do whatever you want to do inside a particular flag or for a particular flag. But the central level configurations, that is, you will have to construct the Launchpad first. Once the Launchpad is ready, then you can go ahead for the application level configuration, and then you can do the configuration for each and every Fiori application, and finally link it to your Fiori Launchpad. So definitely only one time you will have to construct this Launchpad. Once it is constructed, once the central level configurations are done, then that's it. Then you can straight away, every time for each and every Fiori application that you want to implement, you can just go for the application level configurations. Any questions onto this up till now? Sorry?
I just joined the class. Been there for a long time, or you guys start?
No. This is the only diagram that I have started for the day.
Okay.
This is the only diagram that I have started. Not to worry. Just one thing, Niranjan, just note down the meeting, because you are also joining the morning class as well. Okay, so just segregate out morning. There is a separate meeting ID, and evening, because today the meeting ID that you have joined, that was the demo meeting ID that we used for the first day for the demo lecture.
Okay.
Just note it down if possible. That this is already going to be the meeting ID for Fiori class, and for UI5 class there is a separate meeting ID which is already forwarded to you.
Sure.
Okay, that's great. We have just started this particular diagram only. We have started with this diagram, and then we just detailed out the configurations inside this diagram within another diagram.
Okay.
So let's drill down the central configuration and application level configuration to more details. So the central level configuration now is further divided inside the central level. As a part of central level configurations, you will do two types of configurations. So let me just one is the UI component configuration, and other is the OData component configuration. Okay, so for the Launchpad to work, or for any UI component to work, or for any component to work inside the Fiori landscape, there would be two important configurations that you will have to do. That is the UI related configuration, and other is the data related configuration, that is the OData related configuration. So in order to construct your Launchpad, there would be a visual aspect, that is the UI aspect, and other would be the data aspect, which would be the OData aspect. So both these aspects, or both this important components, you will have to configure in order to construct your Launchpad. One thing to keep in mind, that this would be a one-time activity. So once you have done the UI component configuration for your Launchpad and the OData component configuration for your Launchpad, that's it. So once your Launchpad is configured, that's it. Then later in the subsequent for the subsequent Fiori applications, you can just do the application level configuration. So the application level configuration is also divided into two types. It's the same type, that is the UI component configuration and the OData component configuration. So for every Fiori application, if you remember, we installed two components. One is onto the front end, which is starts from UI, which is related to the UI component, and other is the component that we install onto the backend, that usually starts from SRA, or sometimes it might also start from GDAPP. Okay, These two component installation, just by installing the things are not going to work. Once they are installed, then you will have to do the related configurations onto the related servers in order to activate, or in order to join the pieces and assemble finally the application, which can be then reused or used by the end user. Okay, so UI component configuration and OData component configuration you will have to do as an application level configuration, and also as a part of central level configuration you will have to do the UI component configuration and the OData configuration for your Launchpad. So in general, at an overview level, this is what we are going to study, or we are going to do it practically for the next, you can say, 6 to 7 hours. This is what we are going to focus more on, how the central level configurations and the application level configurations and the different types of configuration, and where and what are we going to do the configurations. So we are going to do it in a bit more detail and at the practical level as well. But at an overview level, this is what the structure will finally look like when we finally do all the configurations. Apart from the configurations, later on, we also have to assign some roles. So this part I'm not discussing as of now. So as of now, we'll just discuss about the configurations, because just by doing the configurations also, the things are not going to work. As I told you, just by doing the installation, the things are not going to work. You have to do the configurations. But just by doing the configurations also, the things are not going to work, because in order to reflect that configuration for a particular set of user, you will have to assign the corresponding role to that particular user. Okay, so you have to assign that particular role to that particular user, and that is where we are going to discuss later on, once the configurations are done, how to assign the different types of role to different types of user in order to make the applications available to the end user. Any questions to understand this at least at an overview level, guys? Chavi, Isha, Ramani, Niranjan.
Jigar, I got disconnected during this call actually just now, so I may repair your recording after this call.
Okay, no problem. I have already recorded it. I will forward it to you.
Questions, you can go ahead.
Okay. So let's go ahead then. That's all in this slide. Let me just open another slide. Okay, so let me just share my screen now. Okay, so first of all, we'll discuss, as we discussed before, we'll discuss about the configurations from now on. So let's first start with the central level configurations, which is a one-time activity that you will have to do onto your newly constructed architecture. So the Fiori UX configuration overview, let's start from the central level configuration. So as I mentioned in the previous, in the previous slide, with the help of a diagram, that before you start configuring specific apps or server, you need to make sure your infrastructure is in place. So the SAP Fiori Launchpad is a part of this infrastructure. SAP Fiori Launchpad, as we have discussed, is basically the central, or you can say the entry point to Fiori apps on mobile devices or desktop devices. The Launchpad designer. Now, again, there are two perspectives of this Fiori Launchpad. One is the end user's perspective, and other is the admin perspective. Okay, end user perspective is something that the end user is what going to see inside the Launchpad, and other is the admin perspective, which is also called as the Launchpad designer, which would be used by the Fiori consultant in order to configure the Fiori applications. So basically the Launchpad designer, or you can say the admin perspective of the Fiori Launchpad, is the standard tool for configuring the Fiori Launchpad. Now the Launchpad designer, which is the admin perspective of the Launchpad, has two layers to it. One is the configuration layer and other is the customizing layer. Now the configuration layer is where all the content delivered by SAP is stored, and it is where system-wide settings or changes take place. The customizing layer is where customers can make changes to specific clients, and then those changes will only be valid for the specified clients. The personalization layer, which is not available inside the Launchpad designer but available in the end user's Launchpad. So this personalization layer is which is available in the Fiori Launchpad, and it is where the end users can make their own personalized changes, such as creating a new group or dragging and dropping a particular Fiori application to any of the groups which are already there inside the Fiori Launchpad. Whatever changes are made by the end users inside the end user Fiori Launchpad are stored inside the personalization layer. So basically there are three important layers in association with the Fiori Launchpad. Two of them are associated with the Launchpad designer, and one is associated with the end user's Launchpad. So before I discuss more onto this, let me first show you both of these Launchpads so you will get an idea what exactly am I talking about. So let me just open my Launchpad. So I'm just opening my Launchpad. This is the end user's Launchpad that I'm trying to open. Okay, so this is always going to be the URL. So it's a static URL, always going to be the same URL, only your IP address and port will change, which is the IP address of your NetWeaver gateway and the port which is opened onto the NetWeaver gateway for communication. Only that would change. Apart from that, this is the static URL: SAP BC UI5 underscore UI5 UI2 shell Fiori Launchpad.html. So this is what you're going to always open in order to access the end user's Launchpad. And this is where the applications are going to be visible to the end user depending upon the roles which are assigned to the credential which I just typed in right now. So depending upon the credential and depending upon the roles that are assigned to that credentials, that particular Fiori application would be visible over here. Okay. Now this is the end user's Launchpad. Similar to this, there is one more Launchpad which is called as the admin perspective of the Launchpad, also named as Launchpad designer. And this is the URL for the Launchpad designer. Let me just yeah. I'll share both of this URLs with you later on in the mail. But this is your Launchpad designer. So you can see the major change in the URL is this part wherein you have something called as AR SRV UPV underscore ADMN. Okay. So this is the perspective of the Launchpad, which is called as the admin perspective. And over here, we are going to configure our Launchpad and the applications inside the Launchpad. So this would be basically used by the Fiori consultant in order to do the configuration as one of the tool to do the configurations. Something which not be available to the end user, but something which would be available just for the Fiori consultants in order to go ahead and do the configuration. So later on when we are going to do the application level configurations, okay, we are going to use this. Okay, we are going to use this Launchpad designer. But as of now, as a part of central configuration that you are trying to do, okay, so initially both of these URLs wouldn't be generated just by doing the installation of the components and just by the basis activity. This Launchpads will not get generated will not get activated. So both of these Launchpad instances which I've opened right now, you need to activate that, and that is what we are going to do inside the central level configurations. That is activating and configuring and constructing the Launchpad. So when I say Launchpad, basically two Launchpads I'm talking about. One is the end user Launchpad, and another is the admin Launchpad. So both these perspectives of Launchpad I need to construct, so that later on using this Launchpads I can do the application level configuration for each and every Fiori application. Okay. Guys, if you have any question in between, you can interrupt me in between and you can ask your question. Okay, so I will just go ahead now. Let's come back. Yeah. So one more thing now associated with this, both of this Launchpad, that is the layers. So there are totally three layers. One is the configuration layer. Then there is this customizing layer and the personalization layer. Now the configuration layer and the customizing layer are associated with the Launchpad designer, and the personalization layer is associated with the end user's Launchpad. Now the configuration layer, which is associated with the with the Launchpad designer, is the place where all the content delivered by SAP is stored, and it is where system-wide settings or changes take place. Again, the customizing layer, which is again the layer which is responsible for Launchpad designer, is where customers or the Fiori consultants can make changes to specific clients, and then those changes will be only valid for the specified clients. So basically, by default, if you see in the Launchpad designer, you can see some of the settings by default. So by default, whatever settings you are able to see, that is because of the configuration layer. The configuration layer stores all the by default settings or all the by default system-wide settings for your Fiori infrastructure. And there is one customizing layer which basically is going to store whatever changes you are going to do onto the standard packages or onto the standard objects which are available inside this Fiori designer. So inside this Launchpad designer, whatever standard objects are there, whatever changes you do, that changes are going to be stored inside the customizing layer. Okay. So these two layers, the configuration and the customizing layer, are responsible for or associated with your Launchpad designer. And this personalization layer is responsible to the end user's Launchpad. Now, what is the personalization layer? Basically, in the end user's Launchpad, what the end user can do is, over here you can see by default these are some groups. These are some groups: manager, HCM, buyer, MM, and inside these groups the applications are categorized. So you can see there is a manager group, and you can see some HCM related manager application. Then there is one buyer MM group, and you can see some buyer related MM applications. So the user, so by default, these groups are created. The end user can also create their own group, or they can also drag and drop one application to another group. Okay, if they want this particular application to be available inside the employee HCM group, so they will just drag and drop and they will place it over here. So whatever changes they are doing onto the Launchpad, onto the end user's Launchpad, those changes are going to be saved in the personalization layer for that particular user. Okay. Now let's say there are two set of users who can log in into the Launchpad, and for both set of users there are these two groups available. One is my home group and one is employee HCM group. For both of these users, there are by default two applications available over here inside this group, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 applications available over here in the HCM group. Let's say out of the two users, one user, he just dragged and dropped this particular application and put it over here inside this particular group. So now, let's say both of the users logs out. Now when the next time the user who has done this particular changes of dragging and dropping, when he logs in, he will see that there is only one application in my home and there are 6 applications in employee HCM. But if the other user logs in, he will see 2 applications over here
and 5 applications over here because he has not done any changes. That means that whatever changes that are stored in the personalization layer, that are stored on each user basis. So for every user, whatever changes the user is doing for according to his requirement, that would be stored or that would be captured in the personalization layer for that particular user only. Are you getting my point, guys? Chavi, Isha, Niranjan.
Yeah, Xavier, got it. It's good.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for replying, guys. Okay, so yeah, so similarly, they can either drag and drop an application, and they can play around with the application inside the group, or if they want, they can also create their own group by just clicking an icon over here. Personalized homepage. You can see when I hover over here, personalized homepage. So basically, whatever changes I'm going to do over here, that would be stored in the personalization layer for that particular user. When I click on this personalized homepage, you will see an option add group. Okay, so if you want to add a group between these two groups, so you can click over here, add group. So the group would be added between these two groups. If you want to add a group between these two groups, you can click over here. You can just play around with that. Sorry. Okay. So this is what you can do. So this is the concept of the 3 layers. So let's come back to our slide again now. Okay. So as a part of configuration, central level configuration, in order to construct our Launchpad, basically we'll have to construct 2 types of Launchpad. One is the end user's Launchpad and another is the admin Launchpad. That is totally we are going to construct 3 layers which are going to internally store the data for the corresponding Launchpads. Okay. So if we come back to our diagram, in the central level configurations, what we need to do is the UI component configuration and the OData service configuration for that particular Launchpad. So let's first start with the OData configuration. Okay. So now over here the actual configuration is starting. So let's start with the OData configuration for the SAP Fiori Launchpad. So if you remember from the first, in the previous week, we talked about the OData being used as the communication channel between the servers. So OData services have to be enabled in the SAP NetWeaver gateway. And once enabled, they establish the mapping between the technical OData name and the corresponding backend service. So in order to set up the Fiori Launchpad and the Launchpad designer, we have to activate some specific OData services which are going to be used by the Launchpad and the Launchpad designer. So to do this, you will have to log into your front-end gateway server and access transaction iwfnd/mint_service, which is the transaction for your activate and maintain service transaction. So within this transaction, you will choose the add service button and then enter the system alias of your local system and enter the technical service name of the OData services. So basically, there are 5 OData services that you need to activate in this step, which would be required by your NetWeaver, by your Fiori Launchpad and your Launchpad designer. So the first OData service, as you can see over here, is the catalog page and gadget service for the configuration layer of the Launchpad designer. So the first OData service is for the configuration layer of the Launchpad designer. The second OData service is for the personalization layer of the Launchpad, end user's Launchpad. The third OData service is for the customizing layer of the Launchpad designer. The fourth OData service is used by the SAP Fiori end user's Launchpad for navigation, between different types of applications. And the final service is used by the SAP Fiori Launchpad designer to read and assign transport requests. So all these 5 OData services needs to be activated, and once they are activated, then you can move on to the next step. So basically, these are the 5 OData services that you will have to activate as a part of OData service configuration for your Launchpad and Launchpad designer, which comes under the central level configuration. So these are the 5 types of OData services. So let's go into the system and let's see how we can do that. So let me just go into the system.
When will we get the access, Jigar?
Just sorry guys, I was actually busy these days, so I was not able to send you. I will straight away after this meeting forward it to you within half an hour by the end of it, for sure. Okay guys, you will get it.
Yeah, thanks.
So I'm just logging inside and I have logged in. Okay. So now very important thing, small recap. If you remember, there are 2 types of deployment options of your NetWeaver gateway. One is the central hub deployment approach and other is the embedded deployment approach. Central hub means basically NetWeaver gateway is a separate component and your backend is a separate component onto a different physical server. And embedded means onto your backend server only, you're installing the NetWeaver gateway, that is the GWFND add-on, and the backend server will start acting as a NetWeaver gateway. So the NetWeaver gateway and the backend, both of them present onto the same system, is called as the embedded system. So now talking about the configuration, the central level configurations. So whatever central level configuration that you are going to do, as of now we are doing the OData configurations, after that we'll do the UI configurations. Whatever configurations from the central level point of view that we are going to do, that's always going to be onto the NetWeaver gateway. So if it's a central hub deployment approach, then definitely you will log on to your NetWeaver gateway and do the configuration. And if it's a central hub deployment, then you will log on to the same system, which is your backend system only, because onto that particular system only, that is only acting as a NetWeaver gateway. So over there only you will log on and you will do that particular configuration. But if it's a central hub deployment, then you will not log on to your backend, but you will log on to your NetWeaver gateway and do the central level configurations. Very important point to note. The central level configurations needs to be done only onto your NetWeaver gateway and has to be done onto your NetWeaver gateway only, because that is meant for your NetWeaver gateway. Because your Fiori Launchpad and your Fiori end users Launchpad and the Launchpad designer are something which would be present onto the NetWeaver gateway. And in order to construct onto the NetWeaver gateway, you need to do the configurations also onto the NetWeaver gateway. Okay, so the configurations, everything from the central level point of view, very important point. If it's central level deployment, you will log on to the NetWeaver gateway and do the configuration. If it's an embedded deployment, not have to worry. It's the only system where you will log on always and do the configuration. That is your backend, which is acting as both the front end and the backend. Okay. So in our case, it's an embedded scenario. So I've logged on to my SAP system, which is acting as both the front end and the back end. So I've just logged in inside that particular embedded system, and I will hit the transaction /IWFND/mint_service. So you will just hit that particular T code, and this is a page that will get open, that is you can say an activate and maintains OData service page. So over here what you will have to do, you will have to add that 5 OData service that we talked about inside the presentation. So it was, so this 5 OData service, page builder conf, page builder pers, page builder cust, interop, and transport is what you will have to enter, or you can say you have to add inside this activated maintained services. By default, onto this page, that particular OData service wouldn't be available. So you will have to add it. Okay. So how to do that? Let's see. So basically, you will have to click on add service button over here. Very simple. Systemalize, very important. Always, either it is a central of deployment approach or it's a embedded deployment approach. Whatever is the deployment approach, the systemalize always is going to be the local one whenever you're doing the central level configurations. Things are going to change when we are going to do the application level configuration. We'll discuss that when we do the application level configuration. But the central level configuration, always the systemalize would be local over here. And you will click on get services. So whatever OData services that are present, or you can say the IWBP or the the DPC and the MPC classes, whatever that are present onto the system, and the OData services that are present onto the system would be, would be shown over here. So your 5 OData services, if they are not added and they are not present onto the first page, then you will see it over here. So you will have to select that particular 5 OData services, whichever they are, which I have listed down in the PPT. Select that and then click on add selected services. Now in our case, that particular 5 OData services are already added So that's the reason I won't be able to see over here anything. Okay, that 5 OData service I won't be able to see. But let's say if this was the OData service, let's say if this was the OData service that I wanted to add. Okay, so I will just click on that particular OData service, select add selected service. It will just tell you to select an object. So let's say I will just select a local object and I will click on tick. Then that particular OData services would be added correctly. So if I come back and if I just search it over here, so I guess this was the name, ZRMP sample flight. Yeah. So this was the name. So you can see that particular service has been got added over here. Okay, and you can see a green color mark which indicate that the service is active. And the system alias was local. That this particular the data. If you remember the diagram again, the diagram in the previous lecture, I draw a diagram. If you remember, the system alias was there and the RFCs all over there. If you recall that diagram, so this is how the system alias is called, and then the corresponding components are called. Okay. So similar to that, the 5 OData services are already present over here. They are already added. So if you see over here, the 5 OData services, that is so one of them interop. You can see the interop service, and that is activated. You can see the green color mark, and also the system alias is local. So you have to check all these points. Then the other is page builder conf is there, page builder cust is there, page builder pers is there, and last but not the least is the transport. So all the 5 OData services are added. Okay, using the same technique, you will click on add service, local over here, get services, select that 5 OData service, click on add OData services, and then assign the local object to that, and then that's it. That particular OData services would be added over here. Now, we just want to check whether that particular OData services, which you are activating are working fine or not. Although it is activated, but just for troubleshooting, just for the safety purpose, I just want to check whether using that OData service, I'm getting some data or not, because the role of OData is to transfer data in lightweight format. Okay, so if I just open any of the OData service, let's say if I open the where is it? Let's say the Z transport one. So you can just select that particular service, click on gateway client. So gateway client got open, and if I just click on execute now, you should be able to see 200 OK, which means that this OData service is not only activated, but also this OData services is replying to, is giving out some data as well. So you can see some data in the corresponding format. Okay, so the status should be always 200 OK over here. So this is one check. Many times what happens, you activate the OData services, but then if the installation is not properly done by the basis guy, or during the installation, some files might have got corrupted. So at that point of time, sometimes what happens, even if the OData service is activated, or if it's coming as green in the previous page, but even then when you try to execute it, it's coming as 200, it's not coming as 200 OK, which means the date it's activated, but the data is not coming out of that. It's not able to find the corresponding DPC and MPC classes and pull out the data from that. Sometimes that causes an issue. So if that's the case, then you have to just again reinstall that particular component, ask the basis guy to just reinstall that particular component and try that part again. So any questions on to the OData service configuration, guys? Shavi, Isha, Ramani, Niranjan.
Yeah, on the there's a small icon called ICF node to the left at the gateway client. What does that mean?
Sorry, this one?
Yeah.
So if I just show you, okay. So there is one corresponding SICF transaction, which is so this basically transaction takes care of the activation point. So if I just
So that's just for deploying the service, right? The SICF.
correct. So if I just deactivate it, so you will see the color has become, so it is deactivated. So basically we are going to discuss in the next slide what exactly the SICF. SICF is basically a framework, an interface between your ABAP and your OData service protocol. So it basically helps you to activate or deactivate a particular OData service. Okay, so if you want the OData service coding is everything is done, but you do not want to use make it available to the end user, make the end user use that particular OData service. So you can just deactivate it with the help of this SICF SICF interface protocol. So with the help of this SICF, basically you can activate and deactivate your OData services. Not only OData services, but also your UI components. Also your UI components later on in the next slide, we are going to see the activation and deactivation of the UI, the configuration of the UI components. So we just saw the configuration of the OData component, and then we'll see the configuration of the UI component. Again, at that point of time also, SICF will come into picture, because if there is already a code written, but you do not want that code to be active, so with the help of SICF, you can deactivate that particular code. So that particular chunk of code will, would be in deactivated form. We'll just make it as active and the color becomes green.
So just one more question, man. When I look at the screen at the top, there's something called load metadata. Why would you do that one? I'm just curious.
Just if you want to refresh the page, you can do that. Sometimes, you have added a service, but it's not reflecting over here. So it's just basically used for refreshing.
Okay.
Nothing else. So just refreshing it. Okay. So this is what you will do as a part of as a part of the OData service configuration for the Fiori Launchpad and the Launchpad Designer. Next, move on to the next slide. We'll just extend a bit, guys. Today we'll just discuss this one more slide and then we will stop it for the day. Let's complete this part at least. Let's not break it in between. So the next part is the UI component configuration. So if you remember this diagram again, OData service configuration for the Fiori Launchpad we have done. Now let's see the UI component configuration that you will have to do for your Fiori Launchpad and the Launchpad Designer. So basically you will have to activate the corresponding ICF nodes for the SAP Fiori Launchpad UI. This is done to the front-end gateway server, that is the NetViewer gateway, using transaction SICF. Now ICF basically stands for Internet Communication Framework, and it is the software layer in an application server that provides an ABAP interface for HTTP, HTTPS, and STMP requests. This framework is basically used in Fiori apps to enable the UI service and at the same time also to enable the OData services. For security reason, all ICF services are made available in an inactive state. For that reason, you will have to follow the path specified in the screen and you have to activate each service for each UI node by right clicking on it and choosing activate. So there are these many components, or you can say these many nodes which are responsible for your UI which comes under the part of UI configuration for the Fiori Launchpad and the Launchpad Designer, which will have to activate. So let's just simply describe each of this ICF node. So first of all is the NWBC node, which is for the NetViewer business client for HTML. Then there is the startup node, which provides the data that is needed for the front-end shell startup. Then there is an AR SRVC launch node, which is used for the launch style application inside the Launchpad Designer. Then there is AR SRV news, which is used for the new style application inside the Launchpad Designer. Then there is this AR SRVC UPB underscore admin, which is the unified shell page, or you can say the root page for the Launchpad Designer. UShell node is for the unified shell, which is the root page for the end user's Launchpad. Then there is a UI2, which is basically the namespace, which is for the namespace, and UI5 underscore UI5 is for the SAP UI5 application handler. So these are the different ICF nodes that you will have to activate by going on or inside the SAP NetViewer gateway system. Very important. If it's a central hub, inside the NetViewer gateway. If it's an embedded, your backend onto your business suite, you will log in, and you will activate all of this different OData service. Sorry, not OData services. All of these different UI nodes inside the SICF transaction. So these are standard. These are standard for any of the Fiori application you want to implement. Whatever might be. These are the standard ICF nodes that you will always have to activate in order to construct your Fiori Launchpad and Launchpad Designer's UI part. So let's move on to the system and let's try to check it out.
This is a one-time activity, right?
Yes. It's a one-time activity. Correct. Correct, Raman. Everything that you are talking as of now is a part of central configuration, and central configuration is a one-time activity. So only one time you will have to activate the UI component, which is meant for your Launchpad and Launchpad Designer. So once you have activated the Launchpad and Launchpad Designer, once your their Launchpad and Launchpad Designer are constructed, then that's it. Then later on you do not have to touch that particular part. So if I just go inside the SICF. Sorry, SICF. You can click on execute. So over here you will have to just search out that path. Either you can do that. So first let's try to search out that path. So let's say inside default host SAP BC, then UI2. SAP BC. Let's say if I want to start this BC UI5 underscore UI5. I'll just search out for that particular path. What is it? UI5 underscore UI5. Then inside that it's SAP and AR SRVC, SAP and AR SRVC. Let's say this. Just have to right click on it and you have to click on activate service. So since it is already activated, that's why it is coming as grayed out. So let me just deactivate that service. And then you can see if it's by default it would be in deactivated mode. All the ICF nodes are by default in deactivated mode. So you can just right click on it and you can click on activate service. That's it. So for each and every node, you will have to drill down to that particular node and you will have to activate that. You can also do one thing, that is you can just copy that particular name. Let's say if I want to activate this, I can just paste it over here and I can click on apply. So it will search it out for me. I don't have to drill down and search it on my own. I can just type in the name over here and you can just search it out over here as well. So all these nodes, which is meant for the UI, which is the UI nodes, very important. These are not the OData nodes. We have already activated the OData nodes from the IWFND transaction. So that particular transaction takes care that the ICF node is also automatically activated. But over here for the UI component configuration, you have to activate the UI nodes, UI ICF nodes, and for which you have to go into the SICF transaction and do it.
Question, Jigar. Normal production environments, do you go with central? Normally the clients goes with the central hub deployment or the embedded one?
As I told you in the previous lecture, it again depends. SAP always recommend you have to go for the central hub. But then in practical scenario, what happens, central hub requires, as I told you, there might be some dependency. Let's say, there are 5 systems, 5 backend systems, and then there is one NetWeaver gateway. Now the version of the NetWeaver gateway that you want to implement, let's say 7.40, which is the latest one. Now the 7.40 NetWeaver gateway expect your backend to be also at the latest enhancement packs. It can be EHP7 or whatever SP level, the latest enhancement pack. So you will have to upgrade it, all your backend systems. Then your, one single point of NetWeaver gateway can actually successfully connect to all of that, and everything will work fine. But if your customer is not ready as of now to upgrade all their corresponding SAP systems or the SAP systems for the Fiori applications, then in that case, many of the time we also implement embedded solution for the customer, wherein we, depending upon the NetWeaver, depending upon the SAP Business Suite version, we install that particular NetWeaver gateway version on top of that, and we carry ahead our work of the Fiori applications. So it again totally depends upon the customer whether they are ready to upgrade, if their backends are not already upgraded, or if not, then the embedded is the only choice left.
If it's a central hub deployment, the UI related services are all activated on the gateway server, and the OData services are activated on the backend.
Sorry, can you come back?
If it's a central hub deployment, where exactly are the UI services activated versus
as I told you, as of now we are just focusing upon the central configurations, not the application level configuration. Inside the central configuration, there are 2 types of configuration, UI and OData. Both of them needs to be done always onto the NetWeaver gateway. In short, you can just summarize, always the central level configuration always would be done onto your NetWeaver gateway.
Okay.
Always. Because the reason being is, the central level configurations you're doing for what? For whom? For the Launchpad and the Launchpad designer. And these components are present onto the NetViewer gateway. In order to configure, in order to activate, in order to do the configurations, you'll have to do the configurations onto the NetViewer gateway itself and not onto your backend systems. So always the central level configuration needs to be done onto your NetViewer gateway only if it's a central level.
Okay. Okay. If it's an embedded option, as we are discussing right now, let's say if I have to activate some apps on the SRM system, right? Can I still use this same NetViewer gateway, which has this ECC backend? Can I use the same NetViewer gateway for the SRM system as well, or
Central hub you're talking about?
no? Let's say I'm going with an embedded option, right?
No. So you're saying that on ECC you will connect to SRM.
Yeah. Let's say I have an ECC system with the NetViewer gateway installed on top of it, right? Same
No,
system.
that's never recommended.
Okay.
We have never implemented this solution for the customer because ultimately, if you want to pull out some data from SRM, you're increasing the load onto your ECC as well.
So in that option, in that case, central hub deployment is recommended.
Central hub, or you will have to install the NetViewer gateway add-on onto both of your backend systems.
Then the URLs will be different, right?
Correct. URL would be different.
Yeah, but typically in an environment, you usually give one URL to the users, which has both the ECC apps and the SRM apps.
So otherwise, what you can do is, we have implemented this solution as well, wherein the customer was not ready for the upgradation, and they also wanted a single URL. Okay. So what you can do, you can have a web dispatcher in between. So this web dispatcher, will act as a single URL for the end user, and then just they will have to change the port number. They will have to change. So if let's say 8007 port is called for that particular URL, then the ECC system Fiori Launchpad would be called, and if it 8008 is called port number, then the SRM Fiori application would be called.
Yeah, but it will be only one link, right? Yeah, if I have to give to an end user who doesn't know all these ports, etc., we just give them one link.
Yeah.
How will the web dispatcher? How do you control the security of what SRM apps and what ECC apps should be shown on that Launchpad?
No. See, the link would be different over here. The link will just contain different ports number. So in the web dispatcher, the basis consultant, they will do the configuration. When the end user calls the same IP address with let's say port number 8007, then it will call the ECC Fiori apps. And if it calls the IP address with the port number 8008, then it will call the SRM Fiori apps. It's like that. So the link would be differing in that case, and the only variable part inside that would be the port number. The port number is what will actually help the web dispatcher to recognize where to route the call. Because the web dispatcher does nothing, it basically routes the call.
Right. So a Fiori Launchpad can have both the ECC apps and SRM apps at the same time. If I log into a Fiori Launchpad, that what we were showing a few minutes back, the HCM and all this stuff, in the same page, would I be able to see the SRM apps as well?
If you're going for central hub or embedded?
Embedded, let's say central app, for example.
Definitely, central hub you can see, because one NetViewer gateway you can connect to multiple backends.
Okay.
So you can definitely do that. Definitely you can do that.
Okay.
The thing about you were mentioning about the URL and the port, and when I look at the Fiori Launchpad, yeah, there's a big icon there. What's configured behind that icon, that URL, the customer really doesn't, or the client doesn't really need to know about, I presume.
Which icon you're talking about?
When you go to the Launchpad, where you have the group, where you have the groups for a client. Now, what's behind this in terms of the URL, the port? I presume that is irrelevant to whoever is using this Launchpad.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it doesn't really matter what the URL is or the port is, right? I have to presume that. Or am I saying
Right.
something wrong?
Right. Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
Why is it?
What
So
configure.
why is it relevant at all? The URL or the port? To them, they're seeing, these particular. You call these icons, like when I say demo, custom app, demonstration. What is that called particularly? It's an app, right?
See,
So
what happened, what actually the Niranjan told was, let's say there are two embedded systems, two embedded
right.
Fiori servers, and you want to, now for this two embedded Fiori servers, there would be two different launch pads.
Oh, but that means you would have to have two launch pads then.
Yes, so you will have two different launch pads. So now what Niranjan told me was he wanted to make the end user, use the same URL to access both the launch pads.
So the only way to do that, then you're saying, is to have a central hub.
Correct.
And then it's possible to use one launch pad where
Multiple applications from different modules can be hosted.
Got it. Now, the other advantage I thought I saw from your previous slide, the central hub, you can have that as the latest and greatest enhancement pack, while the backend systems like the ECC or the SRM or necessarily have to be at the latest enhancement pack.
Correct.
Would that depend also on the app you're trying to deploy based on what you showed us, or?
Definitely. Now what happens, every Fiori application for different modules has a prerequisite. If you have seen the previous lecture, we discussed a track purchase order application, and we saw the prerequisite that this particular Fiori application requires this backend version and this NetWeaver gateway version. Every Fiori application is a different prerequisite. So what if you install a NetWeaver gateway, you already have a backend system, let's say, and you are not ready, you do not want to upgrade it, or you have a NetWeaver gateway and you do not want to upgrade it. Okay, so in that case, what you are going to do? In that case, because there are multiple backends involved, then definitely if the customer is not ready to upgrade, because now the NetWeaver communication between the NetWeaver gateway and the backend system is dependent upon the versions. Both of the versions should be matched. Now, if you have met the NetWeaver gateway version, you have installed the latest one, but you have not met the version of your backend system. You are not ready to upgrade that. But then for that particular NetWeaver gateway, let's say 7.40, it's mandatory that you should have EHP 7. Then what you will do? Then it might work for other backend, but for SRM, let's say it's not working because you do not have the latest for SRM. So in that case, sometimes this causes an issue, and that's why for most of the times, in fact, we also have to go for embedded deployment while solutioning to the customers if they are not ready to upgrade straight away. Are you getting my point?
Yep, I got it.
So it totally actually depends upon the customer. So we have to put all these points in front of the customer, and then they are someone who can actually then take a decision whether because in the long run, definitely SAP will always recommend go for central hub, because in the long run this is definitely going to help save a lot of basis tasks and save a lot of installation tasks actually. But then if the customers, if they are not ready to upgrade, then we have to go for embedded. That's the only option left. Okay guys, anything else?
And the central configuration that I know maybe I have missed a few minutes. I was late by a few minutes, right? The central configuration, you mean to say the Launchpad and the Launchpad designer configuration?
Correct.
Okay.
Launchpad and the Launchpad designer both comes under the central configuration, which is like your building. And inside that, we are going to then add our Fiori application when you're going to do the application level configurations.
Okay. And are we going to use the same system that you are using right now? Or
Yes.
Are we going to use it?
Same system.
So it's pretty all pre-configured.
it's not pre-configured. Only the central configurations are already done, because
Okay.
you know without the central configurations you won't be able to see the launchpad only.
Yeah, I
That is
see
that
this page.
application level configuration. Definitely, it's not pre-configured. We'll have to do that.
Okay. So none of these apps work at the moment. Just a tile.
No, they work. Some of them they work. Some of them they do not work. So we can deactivate and activate them again. I mean, we can deconfigure them and configure them again. So that's not an issue. But definitely the components are installed. Okay.
Okay.
Because without the components getting installed, we cannot do any configuration. So definitely the most important part for us is the components are installed by the basis people, and now we can go ahead and do our configurations and do the linking of the application, assign some roles, and play around with the applications.
Okay. You install all the relevant SRAs in the basis installs all the relevant SRAs in the backend, right? For example, the
Correct.
employee related apps.
SRAs or GBAPP, that is the OData component onto the backend and the UI component onto the front end. That is the NetViewer gateway. If it is embedded deployment, embedded system, then definitely everything onto the same system, which is in our case, everything is present onto the same system.
So the confusing part is the OData that we are talking about, right? We need to do OData configuration on the NetViewer and also on the backend. Is that right?
See, do not think about that part as of now. See, now the component that we are installing is onto the backend, correct?
Yeah.
But that component is for the application. As of now, we are not talking about the application. We are just talking about the infrastructure. That is the NetViewer, that is the Launchpad. And the Launchpad is not present onto the backend. It is only present onto the NetViewer gateway. That's why even the UI and the OData configurations we are doing onto the NetViewer gateway. Later on, when we do the OData configurations, definitely we are going to touch the backend, because the SRAs are present onto the backend for that particular Fiori application.
Okay, got it.
As of now, do not worry about the application level configuration. For that, the component is present onto the backend. But for Fiori infrastructure setup, all the components are present onto the NetViewer gateway, and that's why we are just only going to touch the NetViewer gateway whenever we do the central configurations.
Yeah.
So your confusion will get completely clear when we go ahead and do the application level configuration, and we'll discuss the diagram again with the application level configuration keeping into mind. It will completely get clear. But as of now, just focus on this central level. That central level always onto the NetViewer gateway, and then later on when we do the application level configuration, we'll see where and how we'll have to touch the different components.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, guys. Then, any more questions? Ramani, Isha, anything from your side?
No questions.
Yes, that's clear.
Okay, guys, that's great. So, guys, let's meet tomorrow, same time, 9 p.m. Indian Standard Time.
Can you share the video?
Yes, I will. Now, every day, I'm going to share the recording into the same folder. I've already shared that folder with you guys. So, onto the same folder, I'm going to share. I'm going to upload my video. So, just, in the morning, probably, the Indian people and the US guy, probably in the evening, you can just check in that folder, the video would be uploaded for the day.
In tomorrow's class, I may not be available. So yeah, if you can.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, guys, let's meet tomorrow. Bye.
Okay, bye. Thank you.